Phantasy Star IV is a game that means an awful lot to me. This is the game that really got me into playing RPGs. I started with Final Fantasy, and that one didn't really catch me as much as Phantasy Star did. It was almost like Phantasy Star opened up like a Pandora's box of other RPGs for me. After playing Phantasy Star IV, I wanted to play the other ones, and I wanted to play just every one that I could get my hands on. I didn't pick up 2 or 3 until I started collecting games, but I played the original Final Fantasy again, I played Final Fantasy IV and VI. I got into Ogre Battle at the time, I got into a whole bunch of others. And when I started collecting games, RPGs were really the ones that I looked for. But I still go back to Phantasy Star IV because I just have so many more memories of playing that game than the others.
I didn't own a Genesis growing up, so in order to play a lot of these games, I had to go over to a friend's house. Thankfully, I had a lot of friends on my street that owned a Sega Genesis. For whatever reason, that was just the system that everybody played at that time. So along with a bunch of other games, that's how I got to play Phantasy Star IV. And all of us just kind of jumped right in and really enjoyed that game. I don't know why, but that one just kind of really stuck out to all of us. I don't know why my friend rented it when he did, but I was really glad that he did. There is a part of me that kind of wishes I could get that, sort of experience back again, but that kind of thing is just sort of long gone. You're not really going to see a time where you go out to a Blockbuster and one of your friends, or you rent a game that you've never heard of before and just jump right into it and fall in love with something that you just really want to keep playing.
Of course, now you've got other ways that you can play a lot of these games, but for me, going back and getting a chance to play these older games has just been something really special. Especially with Phantasy Stars, because I had never really played the first one before until really starting up on YouTube. And so I went through that one, went through Phantasy Star II, went through Phantasy Star III, and now I've come full circle back to Phantasy Star IV. This is one I wanted to play for a while, but I just hadn't gotten back around to it until recently. So let's go ahead and just dive into the story of this game. So the first thing I want to say is just how Phantasy Star, like 2, 3, and 4, and even with the first one, they've kept this kind of like cutscene that looks a little bit like a comic book. They've kept that pretty much the same. I love this. I wish more retro RPGs had done it. I kind of understand why they didn't on the NES, just for memory restrictions, but this was so cool seeing this, because you just didn't see something like this. It was just really, really awesome the way they did it, and it was a great way to get across a lot of the tension and really kind of do some time cuts in a lot of the different parts of this game. So what Phantasy Star IV does from a story standpoint is it kind of wraps up all the plot threads from, really 1 and 2. It explains a lot from 3 because that one is really just, it's an outlier in the series and it needed to have its plot kind of explained and how it ties into all of the other games. 3's basically... 3 was basically done by a totally different team. So when the original team came back for 4, they basically explained how all of the spaceships that fled the second planet that blew up at the end of 2, basically all of those ships went off into the universe. Some of them might still be out there. One of them ended up orbiting around Moldova, and another, I think, no, just the one around Moldova. You end up finding that one because its orbit had decayed and it crash landed. You do find out that some of the other refugees from Parma, the second planet, they ended up going to the third planet in the system. So it kind of explains what's going on, how, the Parmanians are still around. God, I hate their stupid names for some of these people. But at least they're still around, so you get to talk to a few of them. It's kind of a nice way to incorporate that, because, again, 3 was done by a different team, so that story doesn't really work too well for the rest of the series. So you start off with the climate control system really just going crazy on Moldova. And it's also created this situation where a bunch of monsters are being created by a factory. And your characters have to go and deal with it, because, apparently nobody else can possibly deal with these things, so we need our heroes to do it. Which is actually pretty awesome. I love the interaction between all the characters, and that's something that Phantasy Star did, was just give you amazing characters that just are so much fun to read about. So in the process of dealing with all of this basically crap that you're just left on your own to deal with, you end up going up against a cult which is led by a guy named Zio, and he is essentially being used by Dark Force because, he's back. Why not? He's been in the other 3 games, even though they've changed his name a couple times, but hey, he's back! And you need to go and kill him again. So awesome! Standard plot from the other couple of games, but, why not? It worked for the first 3, so, hey, it can work again for this one. But they throw a few little wrinkles into it. It's not just Dark Force. You have to deal with something that's apparently eviler than Dark Force, if that's even a real word. But hey, you're the heroes, you can do this. And this is where the story gets to the point where I just wanted to yell at it. It basically moves in a direction where you had the ultimate evil of whatever, just the ultimate evil, and the ultimate good. They fought, good won, but doesn't finish the job, because of course it can't. We wouldn't have a series of good finish the job. So it seals the ultimate evil away in its own little pocket dimension, and it creates this solar system as a seal to keep the ultimate evil trapped. And then for some odd reason, the ultimate good in the universe decides that every 1,000 years the seal is going to weaken, and the ultimate evil is going to be able to project itself onto the solar system. And that projection ends up being Dark Force. Why the ultimate good did this is just, I guess it wanted to fuck with everybody that was in this solar system, just out of spite. I don't know. These gods are really weird. And then the gods decide that it's a good idea to have a 4th planet in this system with an orbit that makes absolutely no sense. So it's on like a 1,000-year orbit that isn't in like I mean, granted, it's not in a perfect circle, but it's in like this weird orbit that every 1,000 years it comes back into the solar system. That marks the weakening of the seal, which makes me think if we just blew up this 4th planet, everything would have been fine, but, whatever. It's explained that Parma got destroyed as part of the machinations of the Profound Darkness, which is the big bad in this game, and that, permanently weakened the seal, which leads to the events of the 4th game. And kind of going off of just the Profound Darkness and the Dark Force and the Profound Darkness, I just want to say, as creative as this game was, And the series is, to be perfectly honest, it's very creative with just like the monster types, the monster names, the whole way that this little solar system works, the different ways in which they tied all the threads together in the fourth game, all of that, the mixing of like biological creatures and more like robotic ones, which they do in every game. The fact that they came up with Dark Force and sometimes Dark Falls and Profound Darkness as the big bad things. I mean, the names are just kind of dumb for the big bads in this series. They could have come up with something way more interesting than that. I don't know why they went with those. I'm sure it kind of makes some sense. Like, there are other stories out there where you have, like, just the big bad thing, which is just, it's evil. That's pretty much all you can say, just the personification of evil. And they don't give it that dumb name. I mean, they could have just called it the Devil, and that would have been fine with me, but they went with Dark Force, which isn't the worst, but then they went with Profound Darkness, so it's just kind of like, okay, it's more eviler, which is still probably not a word, but whatever. I don't know. It's just one of the weird things in this game that bothers me in an otherwise just spectacular game. And this game really is spectacular. I mean, the way that it just works everything together, it's just so much fun to play. It's just really cool. I love it so much. But I just get hung up on how dumb the big bad guys' names are. Whatever. It really is just a lot of fun to look at and a lot of fun to play, which kind of upsets me a little bit about its future. But before we go into that, let's talk about the final boss fight. This is such an awesome boss fight. You go up against the Profound Darkness, and he has 3 different forms, which each one of them looks really badass. This is the first form here. And there's a lot that goes into it. You need to do a lot of different strategy in order to conserve your different like tech points and also your different skills that you have. That's one thing I haven't mentioned too much. You have both skills and you have your actual like magic, which they call tech here. This is a really cool way of doing this. And it's not an easy fight unless you've like leveled yourself up ridiculously and you've gathered a lot of kind of cheater items that you can get. But it's such a good boss fight. And it really made me feel like I was doing something. Here's the last form here of Dark Force. And it just looks so cool where you have something that starts out as very like biological and it slowly moves into like a more technical aspect. Almost like you're fighting an android at the very end. And that's kind of how a lot of these games have progressed. You start off fighting a lot of biological problems, like a lot of biological enemies, and it slowly progresses to fighting off like androids and fighting off robots. And that's one thing I can say about this boss fight. It's not really fighting off like an actual robot, but it kind of looks that way if you look at it just right. And you get a lot that goes into the end here. You have Chaz kind of questioning whether or not any of this is right, like I mentioned earlier. And a lot of his issues I totally agree with. It's really stupid the way they did this. Where it's explained that, the light or the goodness just decided to leave and have you guys on your own. And you go into the dimension to fight the Profound Darkness. And you end up beating it, obviously, and it just gives you this really awesome ending where you get closure on pretty much all the different characters that you meet along the way. It's just really fun to see you and most of your comrades that you had make it out all right at the end. You have that one moment where you have somebody who sacrifices herself for you so you can keep going. And it's just such a great story to end on. It's just really awesome.
unfortunately, Phantasy Star IV closes out the main storyline. From here it moved to being online, so yeah, there was that. I enjoyed Phantasy Star Online when I played it. I never really played the second one. And there was also a prequel, Phantasy Star Zero, which I also didn't really bother to play because I keep waiting and wanting Sega to make Phantasy Star V, but somehow I know that they're not really going to do that.
And knowing that Sega's just kind of left this series by the wayside or moved in a direction which I don't really want the series to move, it kind of feels a little bad. I mean, you're given just this nice wrap up to everything, and then the series that you love just kind of dies. Or it changes into something else. And that kind of mirrors Sega in some ways. It started off as something that I really loved. It made a lot of things that I really liked. And you just saw that thing that you really enjoyed, that thing that you loved, the thing that made a lot of great games, gave you a lot of great childhood memories. You just sort of saw that end and move on and do something different. And you just kind of had to do that yourself. You had to move on to find something new. You couldn't just sit there and kind of pine over what could have been or what, should have been if you were doing things or if things had gone out differently. It's nice to kind of speculate on that stuff, but at the end of the day, it's not really going to matter. It's not the way you should really keep doing things. And that's just sort of how I felt after really kind of revisiting this entire series. You just need to keep going on, just one foot in front of the other, and find something else that you like, or move on and do something else, and find a new series. But, you can always go back and revisit the old ones. So sorry about just kind of being a bit of a downer there. It's just kind of weird going through all 4 of the Phantasy Star games, beating the ones that I hadn't beaten before, giving a second shot to all of them, finally getting a chance to really play the first one, really giving the second one more of a shot, and kind of being a bit disappointed with the third, but still finding some merit in it, and then getting to return to 4 and really dig my teeth back into it. It's just been a lot of fun to look back at all of these games. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much the end of our little journey through the Phantasy Star series. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and, just have a great day, everyone. I know it's been kind of a crappy year, but hopefully I brought a little bit of a smile to your faces, and hopefully this series has done the same for you. So, let me know what you think, and have a great day, everybody.